Alright, so I just went to the recently opened Universal Kids Resort in Frisco, Texas, and the question is it really as bad as it looks? Let me set the stage of expectations for you. Throughout the 2010s, Universal parks were going through a bad phase, replacing a lot of great but aging attractions with screen-based rides that people were quickly getting sick of. Universal had always played second fiddle to Disney, but this only solidified that sentiment, because how can anyone really think that something like Fast and Furious Supercharged was a good idea? Yet in 2019, I was blown away by the opening of Hagrid's at Islands of Adventure, and this was soon followed by the Jurassic World retheme of Jurassic Park the Ride in early 2020, which was underwhelming. Still, to Universal's credit, they opened this ride in phases, and when Universal Hollywood reopened around the pandemic, the ride was completed and much more impressive. On top of this, they debuted The Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash, an absolutely stunning dark ride, along with Velocicoaster and Islands, and an entirely new park with Universal Beijing, which, while certainly not flawless, was still a park with strong highlights. There was also Super Nintendo World in Osaka, and while the land and its rides have been criticized since opening in the US, I still think it's very strong themed design. Universal was really turning itself around, and among all of this, everyone was excitedly waiting for Epic Universe, which was rumored to be a wildly ambitious park, and now that it's open, we know that it definitely delivered. Things were looking great, and in 2023, Universal announced something very different. In Las Vegas, they were going to open a permanent Halloween Horror Nights attraction, and in Texas, a smaller park intended for younger kids. It's clear what Universal was doing here, appealing to adults in Las Vegas and to families in the middle of the US, building brand familiarity so that more eyes would be drawn to their flagship Orlando resort. I can't speak on the Halloween Horror Nights attraction in Vegas, as I haven't been yet, although it seems to be considered mediocre. But among all the excitement of Epic Universe and everything else that Universal was doing, Universal Kids Resort seemed like an easy win. The early concept art showed something very different from what I just experienced, and while I can see a lot of themed lands that did make it into the actual park, it's clear that Universal did not have solid plans, even in 2023. However, at the time the announcement was made, I was optimistic, but I didn't really pay attention to its construction progress because I knew it would be on a smaller scale, as its target demographic was really young kids. However, after a few years without hearing much, I stumbled across drone shots of the park a few months ago, and I was shocked. This looked like a barely themed concrete wasteland, something on par with Peppa Pig theme park. And worse, Universal soon released digital renderings of what this park would look like, and it was as cheap and bare bones as it could get. But you know what? I reserved my judgment since this wasn't the final product, and a lot can change in a short period of time. However, Universal then invited media just before opening, and it looked so much worse than even the drone photos showed. And so, I immediately booked a trip, because I knew I had to see it for myself. This is just amateurish and downright embarrassing. So join me today as I walk you through Universal Kids Resort. Because wow, I was absolutely stunned by what Universal built here. Hey, just a quick favor, but videos like these take a lot of time and money to produce, especially since I had to pay to fly to Dallas and stay in a hotel and pay for admission for the park. So if you would like to support the channel, one easy way to do so is just to leave a like. I don't know any better way to start the video than just walking you through what the park entails land by land, so let's start right at the front. The entrance with the Universal Kids photo op leads you directly under the hotel where admission and security is located. And honestly, considering the bright and colorful kids theme of the park, there's nothing I can really find fault with here. Some people might criticize the hotel for being too blocky, which is a valid concern that many people, including myself, have had with Disney and Universal recently. But here, I think the simplicity actually works. Walking into the park though, the first area you'll enter is Isle of Curiosity, a land that isn't anything more than just a hot concrete plaza with some very basic vendors, including a tiny cafe and stroller and wheelchair rentals. There's also the park's main gift shop, which is imaginatively known as Universal Kids Resort Store. And I guess that's quite a choice. If you're going to name everything like Universal Kids Store or Universal Kids Resort Cafe, why did you even bother calling this land the Isle of Curiosity? If we're going for pure utilitarianism, you could have just labeled this area as Park Entrance on the map, which would have been perfectly fine. If you go into the store though, it's pretty sizable and is made up of different areas, each representing a themed land within the park. It's very simple and clearly designed to easily swap out themes if needed, but I will say that I think some of the merchandise is pretty decent. It's not for me obviously, but I think if you take the target demographic of really young kids into mind, Universal did do a decent job with the merch both here and throughout the rest of the park. To finish out Isle of Curiosity, as you walk into the park, there is an overlook leading to what I guess you might call a reveal, allowing you to gaze over the park's largest attraction, known as Bella Bay Cruise. The park is pretty small and mostly flows in a circle, but its center is anchored around a Minion-themed land containing this raft ride. The first thing you'll probably notice about Bella Bay Cruise is that there's a lot of bare and exposed concrete, leading to a lot of people joking that it's a solid example of brutalist architecture. When the park was open to media previews, the concrete here was pretty bare, although since the park has opened, it appears that Universal has been slowly applying decals along the walls, which do give it a good bit of color. I was able to spot quite a bit of this, and by the time this video is up, they might even be done, but the theming here is still very minimal. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to ride this attraction because it was down for most of the day, and by the time it did reopen with a 45-minute wait, it went down about 15 minutes later, so I didn't really even bother because I didn't think I was missing much. Still, there is an interesting whirlpool element that's pretty rare for a raft attraction, so it's at least somewhat notable in that regard. If we actually step further into this land, it's essentially a glorified splash pad filled with meet and greets, and I guess what I can only describe as, Minion decor? In addition to all the water features in Bella Bay, the land also contains an additional attraction called Golf Cart Derby, which is a type of flat ride known as Demolition Derby. While the majority of this land does take up the middle of the park, it does apparently spill out to the main circle with a small souvenir shop and snack stand. I do want to highlight that I tried the popcorn, which is flavored with both banana and grape, both of which are actually pretty good. I also tried the shaved ice, with the purple still being flavored to grape, but the yellow to pineapple. They were both pretty straightforward in what they were offering, but they are refreshing on a hot day, and are at least presented in a fun and colorful way. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the name of this land is Illumination's Minions vs. Minions Bella Bay Club. And I think, why is it so formal and corporate? Wow kids, look over there, it's Illumination's Minions vs. Minions Bella Bay Club. What? This park has all kinds of bizarre naming practices applied all over, so keep that in mind as we move on. If you start back at the Isle of Curiosity, or Concrete Plaza as I like to call it, moving through the park clockwise, you'll first enter DreamWorks Trolls Fest. On the left, you'll notice a playground, which has absolutely no signage or designation on a park map, so it literally does not have a name. And then moving forward into the land, it contains a few different off-the-shelf attractions. The most notable here is probably Rhonda's Trolls Fest Express, a roller coaster that I didn't get the chance to ride because outside of a few cycles I was able to record, it seemed to be down every time I walked by. Not that it was like I was really missing much. Otherwise, the land contains an outdoor but covered dining area, a balloon tower flat ride called Hair in the Clouds, and an outdoor venue called the Trolls Amphitheater. I didn't stop to watch the show, but it's your typical theme park kids dance party kind of entertainment. Nothing of substance to really see here. And that's it. The land otherwise has some meet and greets and an entire shop that again weirdly has no name, either on the exterior or on the map. If you walk inside, it's the selection of Trolls merchandise that you would expect, but what makes it stand out is an experience called Sparkle, Shine, Glitter, Glow. a makeup experience where you're made to look up like a troll. Kind of like the Darkmoor monster makeup experience, I think. I never actually saw anyone with face paint in the park, and this is kind of hidden away, which might be part of the problem, but I can see the audience for it. Otherwise, there's nothing really else to see in this land, and so let's move on to DreamWorks Shrek's Swamp, which is another really clunky name. This is really just another concrete corridor that features a dry playground, a tiny water playground, and I think what is arguably Universal's worst ride they've ever created. It's known as Shrek and Fiona's Happily Ogre After, and after moving through the sea of unthemed metal switchbacks, you finally board what might be this park's closest thing to a dark ride. For some reason, you get on these swamp-themed cars and ride around a large garden, looking at cheaply themed cutouts that tell the story of the first Shrek movie. There's very little movement, and what's there is quite basic. But what also strikes me as odd is the bizarre artistic style, especially for Shrek. As you pass each scene, there's audio of the characters talking, but it's so quiet that you might miss it, because what's also really strange is that you can hear the ride ops spieling throughout the entire ride, instructing people to stay seated and wait until the next car moves forward in the station, which overpowers the audio in the ride scenes. I didn't focus my camera on it, but if you look closely to the left side of the track, there is just a real functioning birdhouse hanging from a tree, which is no big deal in itself. But there's something about the way this park was designed that feels messy and amateurish, and the presence of this random birdhouse that has nothing to do with the ride reinforces that notion. It's just so weird because it has no business being there. And speaking of which, as you near the end of the ride, there's a big conspicuous rig with cameras that take your photo, and I thought, why? I checked the photo booth at the end of the ride, and it's just so amusing because everyone looks bored and disinterested, raising the question of how anyone thought an on-ride photo was a good idea here. If you've noticed, this park is also barren and very hot, and the way the offloading procedure works here on the ride requires 4 vehicles to stack up, all of which are just baking in the sun as you wait for the slow operations to load the next round of vehicles. That is, unless you got lucky like me and got the first car, because it does pull up to a, get this, portable air conditioner right off the station, just pointing at this one single vehicle, which is hilarious. It's really reinforcing my narrative about how amateurish the design of this park is. On my trip to Dallas, I also took the opportunity to visit Six Flags Over Texas, and they have an absolutely bizarre attraction called Dino Off-Road Adventures, which is just an old car ride where they stuck animatronic dinosaurs along the track. Even that's putting more effort and money into the experience than Universal did with the Shrek ride, and I have to repeat the notion that this park is just embarrassing. Anyways, let's move on to the next land, which is known as DreamWorks Puss in Boots Del Mar, which is probably the best themed area of the park. Don't get me wrong, it's still just a bunch of square buildings painted to evoke the idea of a Spanish village, which isn't much, but it's the best looking land we've seen so far. There are 2 attractions here, a swing ride that is creatively named Swings Over Del Mar, and a puppet show at the Puss in Boots Theater. I didn't stop to watch it, but skimming through video of the performance, at least there's a little bit of story and neat puppetry here. Definitely an improvement over the Trolls Dance Party. The nearby shop also has a bakery where I tried 2 cake pops, with the Puss in Boots paw print being vanilla, and the Shrek meme one being chocolate, both of which were forgettable and mediocre. I should also mention the restaurant, which, forgive my Spanish, I think is pronounced Comidas y Leche, which is kind of themed on the inside, and while I didn't try any of the food, I saw some of it coming out, and it looked decent for a theme park. Like the other lands here, Puss in Boots Del Mar offered very little, and so let's continue on. You'll next encounter Jurassic World Adventure Camp, which I think might be the only land in the park without an awkward name, and again, there's just not a lot to see and do here. Having approached this land from Puss in Boots Del Mar, the first thing you'll notice is a very basic ropes course called the Lookout Towers, which, well, I think giving it a themed name was generous, because it's literally just ropes and metal. Otherwise, there's a Stegosaurus themed playground, a pair of jumping towers called Tyranno Drop, a spinning flat ride known as Mr. DNA's Double Helix Spin, and a small roller coaster known as the Cretaceous Coaster, which was fine. It's exactly what you would expect. The only surprise is that there's apparently a story where you have to find Bumpy, a baby Ankylosaurus from the Camp Cretaceous Netflix series, and at the end of the ride, you find her as the one single animated figure in the entire park. I don't even know if that really counts because she just bobs her head up and down, but it was kind of interesting to discover. Other than the attractions, Jurassic World Adventure Camp includes a small shop, Jurassic World Outfitters, and a restaurant, Jurassic World Canteen. This is the one place I got an actual meal in, and the theming is fine, reminding me a bit of the restaurant from the Jurassic Park Visitor Center in the first movie. I had heard that, despite the flaws of Universal Kids, the food was actually really good, and so I tried the Carnivore Beef Bowl, which is steak skewers with chimichurri sauce over cilantro lime rice, black beans, and tomato cucumber salad. The steak and the sauce was fine, but the rest of the bowl was bland. So I would describe this as being a hair above cafeteria food in terms of quality. I've been seeing all your typical and disingenuous theme park food influencer posts trying to hype up the food in this park. And while it's certainly better than the pig slop at Six Flags, it's really nothing special other than the nice presentation. This dish was fine, and judging other dishes visually from the other restaurants in the park, it all seems likely to be on the same level of slightly above average theme park food. Moving into our last land of the park, it's known as Nickelodeon's SpongeBob SquarePants Bikini Bottom, just another weirdly corporate name that is completely unnecessary. The attractions include an aerial carousel called Jellyfish Fields Jamboree, the water-centric Bobbing Barrels, a rock and tug known as Barnacle Bus, and Mrs. Puff's Boating School, which I think is a Himalaya flat ride. This land also contains a sizable water playground named Pineapple Paradise, and it's just so ugly. Really, the rest of this land is pretty garish too, filled with painted square buildings and hot concrete, resulting in a disappointing Bikini Bottom. The land does contain a themed shop, Bargain Mart, which the blockiness does actually lend itself to the treasure chest-shaped building, but one big issue that people continue pointing out is the lack of a Krusty Krab, which is obviously iconic to the show. Instead, the land's quick service restaurant is Goofy Goobers, which is just another square building from the outside, and walking into the interior, the theming is very basic. The main counter serves burgers, chicken tenders, and other standard theme park food, and if you look right, there's a counter just for ice cream, selling the triple Gooberberry Sunrise Sundae, which is more actual plastic souvenir cup than edible ice cream. I agree with the general online sentiment though. Why didn't you build a Krusty Krab in the park? Now, from what I've seen here, I know that it wouldn't have been adapted in a way that was satisfying to fans of the show, because Bikini Bottom, and really the rest of the park, is just so cheaply executed. But my question is, why? How could things have gone so badly here when we expect more from Universal? It's clear that the point of Universal Kids is to build brand familiarity, hoping that once people's kids are old enough, they'll choose to vacation at Universal Orlando rather than Walt Disney World. But while I expected it to be cheap, I didn't expect it to be this cheap. I will say, if you want to bring a 4-year-old here and they want to play in the splash pads, dance with trolls, and ride some of the rides, you'll definitely have a successful day. But anybody could have built a park like this. And since the goal here is for Universal to promote their brand and show why you should choose them in the future, they really failed just about everywhere. Because if I lived in the central United States and knew nothing about Universal, this would give me an impression of cheapness, and would not make me want to fly to Florida and spend a week at the parks there. I don't expect a regional Universal Kids park to spend billions on ultra-immersive theming and technologically innovative rides, but I do expect Universal branding, which is theming that goes beyond what a regional park is capable of doing. One of the easiest comparisons to make is with the Lookout Towers in Jurassic World, an attraction that is so basic that I wouldn't even consider it to be themed. Yet, if you go to Jurassic Park at Islands of Adventure and into Camp Jurassic, this is an incredible themed play area that kids, and frankly adults, can spend hours in. Its pathways are extensive, multi-layered, and even maze-like, and you can do things like go down slides, climb through the lookout towers, engage with interactive water features, or explore the amber mines, which are a hidden and extensive cave system, providing a true sense of adventure. On top of that, Pteranodon Flyers is a distinctly novel coaster for kids that provides a scenic view of the area, and it's all wrapped up in an experience that is well themed, immersive, and arguably is the best playground ever designed for a theme park. It's also significantly more expensive than some basic rope bridges, but I doubt it reaches the cost of a major attraction. Universal should have really put more money into Universal Kids, and Camp Jurassic is a really good example of the kind of investments that they should have made. It still reflects a high level of theming we've come to expect from the company, but it's accessible to pretty much all demographics, while still catering to the interests of younger kids. I think that's a big part of the problem. Universal could have still committed to a cheaper park that definitely focuses on younger children, but should be more broadly appealing to families, rather than what they actually built that's purely for the age range of 3 to 8 years old. I also looked to other themed play areas of Islands of Adventure, like Me Ship the Olive in Tuna Lagoon, and If I Ran the Zoo in Seuss Landing, and I'm seeing a template for highly themed and interactive play attractions that would have elevated Universal Kids into something much more on-brand. I know the point of the park is not to be a major destination, but I actually think that it should be. Not enough to draw people away from Universal's flagship resort, which is the end goal, but enough to give people a taste and make them want more. One of the most surprising aspects of Universal Kids is the complete lack of dark rides, and I think that if there were 2 or maybe 3 in this park, it would make a huge difference in its appeal. They could be relatively simple and budget-friendly. Think a pretzel-style dark ride like the Cat in the Hat, or any of the iconic attractions of Disneyland's Fantasyland, and it would really elevate the park into something that appeals more broadly to families, rather than some flat rides and splash pads that any other park operator could have built. For as bad as I think VillainCon is, I'd say that even its addition would be a positive to the park at this point. It's not just the lack of quality rides that really brings this park down, but also its pure utilitarian cheapness. Look at all of the ugly, unthemed switchbacks that make up the ride queues, and why is every building just a painted box? It occurred to me that when I went and experienced Six Flags Over Texas' new coaster, Tormenta, even this had more decoration and theming on its station than I ever saw from Universal's new park. Why, for the second time in this video, is Six Flags the better themed experience? I don't think Universal Kids should have gone for immersive themed lands like an Epic Universe, but should have at least embraced a high level of theming instead of just doing the bare minimum. For all the criticism I've had of the clear cheapness of DreamWorks Land at Universal Studios Florida, even that has a fully realized recreation of Shrek's hut, and at Universal Kids, the best it got was a cheap flat facade for the weird Shrek car ride. It also didn't need the best Bikini Bottom ever, but actually putting effort into the land and building a serviceable Krusty Krab would I think have created a lot of viral marketing that would have done a lot for Universal's brand image, even outside of marketing just this park. Universal Kids is both a budgetary and creative failure, and from what I observed, may actually already be a financial flop as well. Something that struck me as interesting was just how easy it was to get tickets to this park only 2 weeks after opening. I had heard that annual passes had sold out, and the first few days had reached ticket capacity, but having visited just a mere 14 days after the park officially opened, I found that I had no issues buying tickets. I'm sure there is a cap, because Universal doesn't want to project the image that the park is overcrowded and miserable, just like they did with Epic Universe at the very beginning, but what's clear to me is that they're not reaching that cap and probably aren't anywhere near it. Maybe this could be specifically because people know it's a new park, and they're staying away until the crowds they thought would be here would settle down, but I'm inclined to think that because this park is what it is, there's the very real chance that it's already underperforming. Still, I think that even if the park did hit the attendance cap, it would still likely struggle to have adequate capacity, which brings me to my next point about operations. When I walked past many of the attractions, they would have what looked like relatively short lines, but would usually be posted at around 25 to 35 minute waits. I recall that when I walked up to Hair in the Clouds, this ride actually showed a 45-minute wait, which, if accurate, is insane. I mean, I understand that flat rides already have low capacity, and that when you're dealing with 3-year-olds, ride loading isn't the fastest process, but having experienced this park when it wasn't even that busy, it's clear that it will struggle if any more people show up. I just want to point out that I watched their loading process for Mrs. Puff's boating school take about 7 minutes, for what I think was a 45-second ride cycle. I also want to return back to the point that the design of this park just feels amateurish, because while we're on the topic of Mrs. Puff's boating school, I have to ask why they zip-tied plexiglass around the ride perimeter. I'm sure there was probably a good safety reason for it, but this is such a sloppy solution that feels like something a poorly run regional park would try. And then what also stands out to me are the "Do Not Enter Vehicle in Motion" warning signs posted all around the ride tracks. Universal has done a great job of safely containing guests in their other parks without these being visible, so their presence everywhere here again makes the park feel like it was designed by amateurs, because the design language is nothing like what you would expect from this company. That brings me to another point, in that I actually suspect that Universal Creative did not design this park and outsourced almost all of its creative decisions elsewhere. I'm sure there was probably a core team that all decisions had to go through, but if, for example, you look at this Minion-themed building, what stands out to me is that very corporate-looking brown accent that divides the colors, feeling like something that came out of a design firm that probably gets most of its work designing strip malls and apartment buildings. It's a very specifically contemporary aesthetic of the 2020s that this park is designed around, and that's why I suspect that Universal did not do a lot of work here themselves, which explains why everything feels so off-brand. Between the barely themed buildings, awkward, unintuitive naming of the lands, and throwing up decals on concrete walls, I think that Universal was likely very hands-off with this. Theme park design divisions like Universal Creative and Disney Imagineering, of course, couldn't do what they do without working with outside firms. But if what I suspect is true about their lack of involvement here, I think that explains why everything looks like it was designed by people without theme park experience. Even DreamWorks Land feels distinctly different, even though because it is so remarkably cheap, you would think you would find similarities between that and this park. That also leads me into another point, which is that if you go to the Universal Kids website, it's not actually showing you the park. Instead, these are all clips from Universal Studios Florida, and this is a very different product from what you can actually expect from Universal Kids. I doubt there's any legal issues with showing this, but it's definitely false advertising, I think because Universal realizes how awful this park looks. And while we're on the topic of amateurish design, why is the Universal Kids Resort map routed through the Universal Hollywood website and not its own? It's not that this is a big deal, but it's a clue to how messy everything about this park has been behind the scenes, and I just don't understand how this all happened. From what I observed walking around, this park was absolutely a hit with the toddlers it was intended for, lined with splash pads and meet and greets with characters that they would know. But Universal Kids is otherwise an embarrassing failure of the Universal brand, and I wonder if this park is going to be as effective as Universal wanted it to be. The point I brought up earlier is that part of the reason that this park exists is to expose people to the Universal brand over Disney, which has a generational hold over so many families. I wondered if I would walk into the park and see vacation booths with people selling resort packages to Universal Orlando, or at least promoting it to families for when their kids are a bit older. And no, there wasn't anything like that. Another thought that occurred to me though, was that maybe this park didn't actually need to advertise anything. If you've been online and see people posting and asking if they should take their really young children to Universal in Florida, you'll also have seen that a lot of replies recommend Disney instead. Universal has more thrill rides suitable for children over the age of 8, but Disney instead is more accessible to everyone, even including infants. I don't know why you would want to bring a 6-month-old to the Magic Kingdom and get on Pirates of the Caribbean, but you certainly could. What I suspect is that Universal Kids is intended to intercept this demographic, where instead of paying for flights to Florida and exposing kids and families to Disney at a young age, Universal is hoping they'll see all the characters at this park instead and choose this much cheaper option, breaking that cycle of Disney brand familiarity. Maybe this park is doing exactly what Universal intended on the cheapest budget possible, but even so, I think if the park added a few play areas on a thematic level like Camp Jurassic or If I Ran the Zoo, along with some cheaper to build but still charming dark rides, it would do a lot more to create a positive perception of the Universal brand, making this a unique destination park without taking away from the desire to visit Orlando at a later time. It'll be interesting to see how this park does and see how it evolves over the next decade. Well, even if it does survive that long, because I can very much see a scenario where Universal sells this park to another operator, and it would be easy enough to strip out the intellectual property. Either way, I hope you found this look into Universal Kids Resort to be an interesting watch, because having gone and experienced it myself, I did find the park fascinating, if for all the wrong reasons. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, one easy way to do so is just to leave a like if you haven't yet done so. As always, if you haven't hit the subscribe button with bell notification yet either, you can also do so now to be alerted to new videos as they're released.